Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to this is our Fund Manager Speaking series. Today we have with us Mr. Rajiv Thakkar. Rajiv is the CIO and Director at PPFAS Asset Management Company. Rajiv needs no introduction. He has been with PPFAS for a long, long time now, Rajiv. Almost all of your investment experience has been with PPFAS?
That's correct. So I spent the time from 94 till 2001 in various different roles related to capital markets, investment banking, bond brokerage, and stuff like that. But the equity investing as a professional manager, I've been with PPFS all along.
Fantastic. So that's almost 2 decades of experience. Wow, fantastic. So tell us, Rajiv, what else other than money excites you? What do you do in your free time?
I have plenty of hobbies to keep me occupied and to waste time. So one of the biggest time sinks for me is playing online chess. So
Oh, fantastic. Okay, that's interesting. Not many chess players that I know. My son is a fan of chess as well. He's also taken part in quite a few competitions. He plays online chess as well. So, yeah.
yeah, although the fashion is to become a bridge player,
Okay.
and bridge is supposed to improve your investing skills.
Yes.
I don't think chess does anything to my investing skills. So it's
Yeah,
only
but
a time sink.
yeah, but I think something that you enjoy and sort of sets your mind, anything, apart from investing is also great. So, yes, thank you for sharing that with us, Rajiv. So, Rajiv, I'm going to jump right into the questions that I have for you today, especially because PPFS is such a niche sort of fund house. You've not been AUM gatherers like we see a lot of other fund houses. You're looking for a particular kind of investors in your fund, but with the fantastic performance and the consistent performance that PPFS has given, I'm sure you will have to deal with this issue as well of scaling and becoming too large and then struggling with performance that we see with funds. So tell me what kind of investors are you ideally looking for, because we see you guys on the media also all the time and you're very consistent with your philosophy, and that works when you're niche, but with scale comes its own issues. So what kind of investors?
So largely we are looking at patient investors rather than people who are jumping up and down every month, or people who ideally we are looking for, to give a cricket analogy, we are looking at people who would watch a test match rather than who want a 2020 in terms of their investments. Of course, test match is out of fashion these days, as is long term investing, especially in the stock market. However, we don't realize that when we take up a salaried employment, let's say in our early or mid 20s, we work for another 35, 40 years, we are long term investors in EPFO. We buy a primary residence and we own it for many, many years. People pay their insurance policies for decades. But somehow, when it comes to equities, people tend to become jumpy. So, largely, we are asking one thing from our investors is, give us time, give us your patience. We have named our scheme long-term equity scheme that conveys the long-term nature. A tax saver scheme anyway has a statutory 3-year lock-in. In the long-term equity scheme, we have relatively stiff exit loads in the first 2 years to discourage short-term investors. And again, we keep communicating. Don't look at the past 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year kind of returns. Look at 5 year plus kind of returns, and look at the investment process and thinking. Invest only if this suits you. So, someone who just looks at uh, maybe some ranking in some portal and invest with us, we can't do anything about that. But wherever we get a chance to communicate our stance, we try and make sure that the expectations are right and the right kind of investor comes to us.
Yeah, so long term, it's interesting in equity, long term becomes, depending on where you are in the country, more than one day, more than one month, more than a year becomes long term. If you're in parts of, say, Gujarat or Bombay, even if you're not trading it back in a day, then you're a long-term investor, because I've heard that from investors. So do you think liquidity, which is one of the hallmarks of equity, which is one of the best things about equity, that you can liquidate it at any time at a moment's notice, is also its negative in a sense?
It is, because see, the instrument per se has no maturity. So equity is a perpetual instrument. When you buy equity shares of a company in a IPO, you are giving money to the company in return for freshly issued shares, and the company has to run a business with that money. Unlike a bond, which has a fixed maturity date. So a commercial paper may have a 30-day, may have a 90-day maturity period, or 3-year bond will mature after 3 years. Equity is a perpetual instrument. However, when it comes to investors, people have the shortest of time horizons for equity and are happy owning bonds for 5 years, 10 years. So that is quite ironical.
Yeah, I know. So I've always found that, equity's greatest virtue, which is liquidity, becomes its vice as well, because that sort of discourages investors in being in it long term. So tell me, how does the recent multi-cap rejig affect your fund positioning? And I know a lot of conversations have happened on Twitter and all of that, but you think, is there a lot of impact on the schemes that you manage? And also on a little controversial note, do you think there's an excess of interference from the regulator in some parts, and in some parts there is absolutely no sort of oversight, so to speak?
So firstly, let's take the multi-cap circular. So this came out on 11th of September, Friday in the evening, post-market hours. And immediately there were numerous reactions from investors, from distributors, from RIAs, from the financial media, and a lot of things came out Friday evening, Saturday, and Sunday. SEBI actually came out with a press release saying it's not coming in force immediately. There's ample time for it to come into force.
Yeah.
There are ample opportunities for investors as well as for fund houses. And at the same time, if something needs to be changed, we are open for feedback on this. So we will invite consultations with AMFI. And in the coming week, AMFI has made a representation. After AMFI's representation was made, Mr. Ajay Tyagi, the SEBI chair person, he addressed the AMFI annual meeting, and even there he mentioned that we are examining the representations made by AMFI, and we are not going to force anyone to do anything which is against investor interest. So, firstly, the final word has yet to be said on the circular. So, it would be appropriate for SEBI to respond to the industry representations and then see what is the roadmap ahead. Speaking for our own fund house, we run one single equity scheme and one tax saver scheme. So we have plenty of categories to choose from without materially altering the scheme characteristics. So we have now close to 4 lakh investors, and these a lot of them have invested with us over 7+ years. So we don't want them to have bought something and now deliver something else. So we want to largely keep the scheme structure intact. And if it requires a recategorization, we'll do so. But I don't think it will come to that. I think some acceptable mechanism will be worked out between AMFI and SEBI and people wiser than me who run the country's financial markets. They'll come to some decision on this. About SEBI regulations and are they too much of activists or things like that. So one has to realize that the mutual fund space deals with public money. Now, to that extent, it's almost equivalent of banks, meaning just like In a bank, you can have 1,000 rupee deposit. Here, you can have clients with low investment amounts, and lakhs and crores of people are affected by what happens in the mutual fund space.
Yeah.
So to that extent, scrutiny and regulation is a given. So you cannot escape scrutiny and regulation. So that is part and parcel of life. Also, in general, pace has accelerated in the world, a pace of change, whether one looks at, so for many decades you had landline telephones, and suddenly you had mobile phones coming in, then first generation internet, 2G, 3G, 4G, now we are talking 5G. The pace of change has accelerated, disruption is happening. So given the developments, many a times what was good enough 3 years back may not be good enough now. So that may require some change in regulation. Do they get things wrong sometimes? Sure. So no one's perfect. But on balance, the influence of SEBI as compared to, let's say, controller of capital issues way back decades ago. Now, obviously, we live in a much better era. Physical shares have made way to dematerialization, electronic trading, uh, rolling settlements instead of weekly settlements, margins on transactions and safety and stuff like that. So even in the mutual fund space, so entry loads have been abolished, cost to the investors has have come down.
Down. Yeah.
Earlier there were multiple schemes doing the same thing. Now scheme categorization has come in. Sometimes we are a bit out of breath because the pace of change is so fast, and
Yeah.
the operations team and the players find it tough to keep pace. But on balance, it's been towards progress. We can have difference of opinion on one or two regulations here and there, and there is a consultative mechanism for those things as well, as is the case with the multi-cap circular, for example.
Fair enough. I think giving them the benefit of doubt and making sure that public money is protected at all times. So I think it's fair enough.
No, it's not even benefit of doubt. On balance, I'm clear in my mind that we are better off today in terms of the financial markets. So at a time when expense ratios were very high, or you had 2%, 3% exit loads, or there were NFOs by the truckloads every month. So obviously, we have improved a lot over the years. And see, sometimes there is the players are also to be partly blamed. I'll tell you why. Meaning, let's say sometimes people go overboard and there are blow ups, and then even if SEBI does not want to do
Get
something,
involved. Yeah.
they are forced to get involved, and sometimes they get strictures from courts and other people, public at large. What was SEBI doing, kind of thing. So obviously, they have to be sensitive to the investing public at large. They cannot just be look at the market players. So
Participants. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
sometimes the participants also share part of the blame in terms of excess regulation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. So in your scheme, speaking about your scheme as well, now you've recently introduced a cover call strategy. So just share with us the thought process behind it, how it works. Because for us, I mean, we think of mutual funds as simple uh, products, So why is this going to be something exotic? Is this going to complicate things for investors?
So let us say your neighbor does not have a passport currently, and your neighbor applies for a passport to the regional passport office. Can you go around spreading rumors that he's emigrating to Dubai just because he's applied for a passport? No, right? Having a passport will enable you to travel to a foreign country if you so desire, as
Yeah.
and when you so desire,
Yeah.
right? So we have introduced a provision in our scheme document, which is an enabling provision, which is like getting a passport, allowing us to travel to a foreign country if we so desire. Same way with the provision, we can write covered call options if we so desire. Now, these opportunities come occasionally. They don't come every now
Every
and
day.
then. Yeah, so the context here is in 2013, when the scheme was launched, at that time, this provision was not there in SEBI regulations. This provision was introduced in 2019, I believe, if memory serves me right. So we said it can be useful in some contexts. So that's why we have introduced it. And one important thing to realize is that now physical delivery of shares is permitted against options. So it can be also a way of actually selling shares in the cash market. Just to give you an example, let's say the expiry is in 5 days. The option expires in 5 days. Now I can choose to sell a share in the cash market, or I can write an option which will get exercised and I can deliver shares against those options. Without getting into technicality, so maybe if we get too deep into this aspect, we can probably spend 2 or 3 hours only discussing various option strategies and what can be done. But the simple point is, it is an enabling provision. That is the first thing. There are many provisions in our schemes which are used very occasionally. Some have never been used. So we have also incorporated a provision to allow us to invest in REITs and InvITs, which we have not used so far. In our liquid scheme, we have a provision for segregated portfolio, which we hope we never have an occasion to use.
Yeah.
Right? But that provision has to be there since regulations have changed and things like that. So, in the month of June and July of 2020, we came across some crazy option prices, and we felt that if we had the opportunity, it would have made sense to do something in this space. So we said, why not incorporate it as part of the scheme documents? It's not going to be a regular feature in the scheme.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, how do you identify stocks in the US markets?
The criteria is the same as is for Indian stocks. So, firstly, we require a decent track record in terms of financial performance. We don't like too much leverage in the balance sheet. There has to be decent return on capital, return on equity kind of ratios. We should be able to understand the product or service, and that should have a decent enough runway in the future. The promoters and management have to be of a good quality, and the valuation has to be attractive. So broadly, these are the criteria. The only difference as far as international stocks go is that we are not buying very niche businesses. And again, just to give an analogy, a westerner may not understand the business of a company like Marico. Like, why do Indians put so much coconut oil in their hair? Would not be clear to a westerner. If there's a niche business in the US which we don't understand, then we don't go there. We are largely buying global multinationals where the product or service is very clear, where the governance is good. We are not buying obscure companies in very frontier kind of markets. So the country also has to have a good track record of uh, capitalism, of being shareholder friendly. Uh, there has to be English language reporting so that we don't have to appoint a translator to really understand what's happening in the business.
Right. So, Amazon is one of the top holdings in your portfolio, right, in the US stock side. But this, I mean, a couple of years ago, I think you guys thought it was a little too complicated. I know we had conversations. You had mentioned this to a colleague of mine then, but now it is that's changed. So, what's the thought process that has changed?
For a long time, and this is only our limitations, this has nothing to do with the company per se. For a long time, we were viewing it with the lens of a pure retail and or the e-commerce play. And the cloud computing piece, although people were talking about it, was uh, not something we appreciated completely. So the cloud computing and let's say there have been these service providers where you have a server somewhere, you rent out a rack. So companies like NetMagic and Rackspace and those kind of companies. So our thinking was, is this a commoditized thing? Meaning, is the cloud computing piece of Amazon something which can be easily replicated, or where you continuously see price erosion and consequently not much margin to the uh, service providers? That was the obscure part. Whereas when we had discussions with people who work in the field, that's where we realized that cloud computing is not as easy as setting up an internet connection and setting up a server farm. There are a lot of other things to it. And when we realize that it's largely a three-player race where you have Amazon, AWS, Azure, and GCP, then obviously it's not a commoditized thing, and all the players will earn decent amount of return on capital. So I think the flipping point was deeper understanding of their cloud business.
Right, right. So, as a value-focused investor, what do you think the traditional method of value investing has changed over the years?
I think it's changed many decades ago. So
Mm.
the shift which happened from, let's say, a pure Benjamin Graham kind of approach to a Buffett Munger kind of approach, I think that has continued till date. So the quality of business has to come first and valuation has to come after, rather than starting with valuation and looking
Mm.
for absolute cheap companies and uh, ignoring quality. I think that has happened decades ago. That is playing out till date.
So, as an investor in your fund, what's like a return that I should expect over, say, a decade? I'm not talking about a short-term period, because the returns itself that we sort of saw in the last couple of decades have changed, but investor expectations haven't changed. They still expect the 20 plus 50, 18 plus kind of return, CAGR, right? So what is going forward? Because I mean, people don't understand that it's linked to inflation, it's linked to GDP. And if inflation is down, if you see over the last couple of decades, FD rates would be, I don't know, I've seen FD rates as 15% myself. So what is a realistic sort of expectation that investors can expect from equities?
So, firstly, I can't give a number. So, uh, this is drilled into our heads that we have to say that mutual funds are subject to market risk and things like that. So, and which is true as well. So, in India from 1992 to 2003, uh, you had flat to negative market. So, these days, 1992 is popular in the culture because of the TV series that has come out.
Yeah.
So at that time, BSE Sensex went up to as high as 4,200, and in 2003 it was as low as 2,850. So after 11 years, you were losing money from the headline index. US has had a decade of flat to zero returns. So firstly, there is this element of market risk in any case, but leaving that aside, you made very interesting points on inflation, on GDP growth, and things like that. Firstly, I would urge investors to look at real returns rather than nominal returns. So, nominal return is the return that you see in your portfolio statement or on portals and things like that. Uh, this investment gave you 13%, or this investment gave you 15%, or this investment gave you 10%. From that number, you have to reduce the inflation. So when if you are seeing 10% on your portfolio return, and if 6% has been the inflation, your real return is only 4%. So at a time when inflation has come down, at a time when interest rates are low, you should expect the nominal return or the return that you see on your portfolio statements, that also should come down proportionately. So that is the first point. When you were seeing 18% returns, that time maybe inflation was 12%. Now that inflation is lower, your returns should be lower. That is the first point. Secondly, it is important to appreciate the role of a portfolio manager or a fund manager. We, to give again a sporting analogy, we are like selectors in a cricket team. A selector will choose which players will form part of the team. Same way, the portfolio manager will select the companies which will be part of the portfolio. However, we are not the actual players. Finally, the players have to deliver. So, at a time when corporate profitability is low or the overall GDP is down, you cannot expect equities alone to go up like a rocket. You have to look at it in the context. So, in this current financial year, first quarter we had a 20+% GDP decline. For the full year, we are looking at a double-digit kind of GDP decline. Corporate profitability will be stressed. So finally, what returns you get from equities depend on corporate profitability rather than only on the skill of the fund manager or things like that.
Great,
so,
Rajiv.
I expect lower returns given that overall economic environment is subdued, and given that inflation is low, interest rates are low, GDP will be low for some time.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rajiv. I know giving a number is the easier part, and explaining this is a little difficult. So thank you for explaining that to our audience, our viewers. And thank you for taking out the time and doing this for us, and for your valuable insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks.